Morning everyone, and welcome to the July Cabinet meeting for Babergh District Council. This is the first of two Cabinet meetings today. We're having the Babergh only subjects this morning, and this afternoon we will be having a simultaneous Cabinet meeting with Mid Suffolk to discuss the climate change July plan. Cabinet meeting for the first item on the agenda. Apologies for absence.
Good morning, councillors. I will call your names in alphabetical order, and if you could indicate your presence for me. Councillor Clive Arfey.
Present.
Councillor Dave Busby. Sorry, councillor, I don't believe you've got your... I think you're muted.
I certainly was.
Thank you.
I am
Councillor Derek Davis.
Here.
Councillor Michael Holt.
Here.
Councillor Elizabeth Malvisi. Councillor Malvisi, are you on mute? Councillor Malvisi, can you hear me? Councillor Malvisi, can you hear me? I believe you're on mute, Councillor Malvisi.
Sorry, yes, I am. I lost everyone a few minutes ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jan Osborne.
Yes, here.
Councillors Lee Parker.
Present.
Councillor John Ward.
Present.
And we do also have Councillor Alistair McCraw with us this morning.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, declaration of interests by councillors. Are there any? No.
Yes, John. Yes, sorry, I'm trying to put my hand up. Yes, I do have one. A non-pecuniary in item 11 on the CCTV for Sudbury and Hadley.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Are there any others from anyone? No. Right, we'll move on then. The next item is paper BCA 1952 to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of June 2020. I will go through those in terms of the page number as shown in modern.gov. So page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, and finally page 11. Does anyone have any comments on any of those? Okay, right. Well, I propose we adopt those minutes. May I have a seconder, please? Anyone going to put a hand up?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. And all in favour of adopting the minutes? Yes?
Yes.
Chair, if I could just do a roll call just to confirm, I think that's easiest. Thank you. So, Councillor Arfey. Sorry, Councillor Arfey, are you on mute?
I'm so sorry. 4.
It's okay. Thank you. Councillor Busby.
4.
Councillor Davis.
4.
Councillor Holt.
4.
Councillor Malvisi.
4.
Councillor Osborne.
4.
Councillor Parker.
4.
And Councillor Ward.
4.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Next item is to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
None received. Thank you. And next, questions by councillors.
Again, none received, Chair.
Thank you. And next, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There were none.
Thank you. Moving on, then the next item is the forthcoming decisions list. Does anyone have any comments about the items on the forthcoming decisions list?
No.
If not, I'll just like to draw your attention to the Cabinet meeting scheduled for August. There are 2 items currently on that agenda. One is a standing item for still bids, and the other is to do with the sale of land in Sudbury. In terms of the SIL bids, there is still some work to in terms of validating them, and so it's more likely they'll come to before us in September rather than August. And secondly, there's been some delays on the land sale in Sudbury due to COVID, and that again looks more likely to be ready for September rather than August. So we're proposing that the August Cabinet meeting be cancelled and the items picked up for the September agenda. Apart from that, I don't have any other comments on the forthcoming decisions list. In which case we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is paper BCA 1953, the General Fund Financial Outturn for 2019 to 2020. So I'm pleased to present report BCA 1953, the 2019 to 20 outturn for the General Fund Revenue Account and the General Fund Capital Programme. Our strategic response to financial challenges, summarised in the 5 key actions in paragraph 4.1, is continuing to be successful. However, you will see in paragraph 4.3 that the Fair Funding Review and business rates revaluation have been postponed yet again to 2022 due to the current crisis. Although the impact of COVID-19 on the 2019 to 2020 budget was minimal, you will all be aware that its full impact on local government finances will be considerable. We are still in the process of understanding the cost increases and income losses in the current financial year and the impact on our medium-term budgeting, and paragraphs 4.7 to 4.10 provide some information about this. We will monitor the impact of COVID-19 as part of the budget monitoring process during the current year, identifying any in-year actions that may be required, and this will form a significant part of the considerations for the budget for 2021 to 22 and the updated medium-term financial strategy. We have had some support from government, just over £913,000, and also £476,000 of the hardship fund for council tax relief and other support. But the total impact, as you will have heard in the recent briefing, is substantially more than that. We do have sufficient reserves to achieve a balanced budget for 2020 to 21, but they will be severely depleted, and the picture beyond that is more worrying. Significant actions may need to be taken to ensure financial stability in the long term, and you have already seen a list of proposed actions that we will have to consider. Last Thursday, we also heard about the additional support package to help with loss of income from sales, fees and charges, and to enable council tax and business rates deficits to be spread over 3 years rather than 1. We are awaiting news of how much we will receive, but this is very welcome news, and it looks to be a very reasonable settlement from government. Right, in terms of the General Fund Revenue Account, this year we do not have the benefit of the one-off additional income we were fortunate to have last year, although we prudently did transfer a considerable amount of this to our reserves then. This year we will have an adverse variance of £219,000. The council tax collection rate remains stable at just under 98.5%, but we are predicting a significant fall this year. We have not chased debt for the first 3 months of this year, but are resuming this soon in agreement with the Shared Revenue Partnership. The business rates collection rate also remains stable at around 98.6%, but this too is expected to be impacted this year. Baseline business rates of 2.1 million and new homes bonus of 0.7 million were allowed for in the budget. New homes bonus is fixed, but the actual amount of business rates does vary, and this is covered further in section 5.10. The variations on expenditure and income compared with the budget have been identified and are presented in the table in paragraph 5.7. A breakdown of the variances with explanations is provided in Appendix A, and the explanations are reproduced in paragraphs 5.9 and 5.10. The net adverse variance can be mainly attributed to business rates, £640,000, and reserves movements of £302,000, offset by favourable variances for planning fee income, £439,000, income we received from the CCG for assisting communities, £275,000, and recharges to the HRA of £159,000, and finally investment income of £100,000. It is worth noting that expenditure on services is generally in line with the budget. The latest position regarding the business rates retention pilot projects is provided in Appendix B. We have received £2.087 million of SIL income, and following deductions for expenditure and the administration charge, the bulk of this has been transferred to the reserve. Moving on to our reserves, our earmarked reserve movements are shown in Appendix D, and excluding SIL show a decline from 5.509 million to 5.042 million, an 8.5% reduction. As a result of the SIL income, the reserve pot now stands at 6.378 million for SIL. Tables 1 and 2 in section 5.15 show more detail for the earmarked reserve transfers, including the business rates equalisation reserve, business rates retention pilot, transformation fund and SIL. The reserve transfers to note are £640,000 from the business rates equalisation reserve, the new wellbeing reserve using the CCG funding I mentioned earlier, £131,000 to the planning reserve for legal costs, and £94,000 to the homelessness and temporary accommodation reserves. There are also carry forward requests totalling £153,000 as shown in paragraph 5.16. The current transformation fund projects are listed in Appendix C, with those still open identified in red in the variance column. You'll be pleased to see in section 5.13 that we've been able to add £355,000 to the transformation fund, and after accounting for outstanding commitments, it now stands at £719,000. Moving on to the capital programme, you'll see that there is a £140,000 favourable variance within the capital programme, the bulk of this being due to community development grants. The capital programme is set out in Appendix E and summarised in paragraph 5.19. The main contractual commitments are shown in paragraph 5.20, and the carry forward requests are shown in 5.21. The latter are either plans or aspirations for investment. It is proposed that these capital resources are carried forward into 2020 to 21 and reviewed as part of the corporate plan to assess whether the original requirement still exists, how it contributes to the strategic priorities, so that we can decide whether the resource can be redirected or removed. I know that this still includes £4 million for Bellevue, but the termination of the hotel project notwithstanding, we will still be looking at this site and the revised master plan for Sudbury, and it is therefore sensible to carry this forward for any new future project. So moving on to the recommendations, I propose the recommendations at paragraph 3.1 of the report, and 3.1 paragraph 3 of the report. And 3.1 of the 2019 to 2020 financial outturn is set out in this report be noted. And 3.2 that the net transfers of £219,000 be approved, and the details are provided in paragraph 3.2. 3.3 that the general fund carry forward requests totaling £153,000 are approved, and 3.4 that the capital carry forward requests also are approved as listed in 3.4. So I'm proposing that. May I have a seconder, please? So, hello, Councillor Davis. You second?
I'm happy to second that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor. Are there any questions from anyone? No questions from any member? Does anyone wish to make any comment about the general fund outturn? In which case, are we all happy to move to the vote then? I think we'll take a vote on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. When I call your name, if you could reply with for, against or abstain. Councillor Arfi.
For.
Councillor Busby.
Or before we all voted, Alistair had a question, I think, didn't he?
I haven't seen anything in the...
Oh, apologies, yes.
Oh, sorry. Councillor McCraw, yes, your name was below my screen.
I do apologise. The system is not as responsive as it might be.
Councillor McCraw.
Just a point that there are two versions of the report circulating at the moment, showing slightly different figures under the second recommendation. And I believe one is an amended, updated version.
Yes.
That wasn't very clearly labelled in the course of the papers. So if you look on Modern Gov, you'll see both papers are shown amongst the list of documents available.
Yeah.
I found that confusing. I hope nobody else did.
Right. Just to be clear, the amended one shows that the correct one, the amended one, shows the net transfers of £219,000, and that includes 640,000 transferred from the Business Rates Equalisation Reserve and 355,000 to the Transformation Fund. Those are the correct numbers.
Yeah, the ones with the yellow highlighting.
That's correct.
Would be the correct ones. What I'm saying is that the other ones are still in general circulation.
Okay.
And are shown on Modern Gov. And that is confusing, potentially. And any member of the public looking at these figures may have the out-of-date ones, is all I'm saying.
We will make sure that only one version is presented to the public then. Thank you.
I'm still prepared to second because I was using the updated version, so I'm happy with that.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Right, we'll move to the vote then, Claire.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I will start again from the beginning. Councillor Clive Arfey.
Yeah, just to say that I was aware of the updated report. That's the one that I was looking at, and my vote is for.
Thank you. Councillor Busby.
It won't come as any surprise to know that I was looking at the old one, but it's still for.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Holt.
I can confirm I was looking at the updated one and for.
Councillor Malvisi. Sorry, Councillor, you're on mute.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, I can confirm that I was also looking at the updated one and I am for.
Councillor Parker.
For.
And Councillor Ward.
For.
That's unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. The next item is paper BCA 1954, the HRA financial outturn for 2019 to 2020. I'm pleased to present report BCA 1954, the 2019 to 2020 outturn for the housing revenue account and capital programme. The strategic context for the HRA is set out in paragraphs 4.1 to 4.8. We have continued to take decisions in line with the 30-year business plan, which have resulted in favourable positions for both revenue and capital for 2019 to 2020. We are continuing with our aspiration to increase our housing stock and now have 3,443 homes. 2019 to 20 is the last year in which we have had to apply the annual 1% rent reduction imposed by the Welfare Reform and Work Act 2016. The impact of COVID-19 on the 2019 to 2020 budget was minimal, but it will be far more significant in terms of both additional costs and loss of income in the current year. As with the general fund, significant actions may need to be taken to ensure financial sustainability in the long term, depending on the level of government support we get. Again, as with the general fund, the impact of COVID-19 will be monitored and reported as part of the budget monitoring reports to Cabinet during 2020 to 21, identifying any in-year actions that may be required. And this will also form a significant part of the considerations for the budget for the 2021 to 22 year and the updated medium-term financial strategy. The HRA business plan will be reviewed this summer to develop a revised plan in response to the financial impact of COVID-19 and the long-term ambitions of the housing service. We are confident that the excellent reserves we have will allow us to achieve a balanced position for 2020 to 21. I'm pleased to report that we have a surplus of 1.506 million for 2019 to 2020 against a forecast budget deficit of £193,000. That means a net favourable variance of £1.699 million for the year. This significant change is primarily as a result of a greatly reduced revenue contribution to capital, which I will address in a minute or two. The key variations on expenditure and income compared with the budget have been identified and are presented in paragraphs 5.5 and 5.6. The key adverse items are an income shortfall of £126,000, which is mostly dwelling rents due to timing differences between actual and planned completion of new build units, £312,000 for housing management, an increase of £602,000 for repairs and maintenance. As with last year, this is mainly due to the use of subcontractors to complete responsive repairs, void works and installation works. And there's also been an increase of £116,000 for property services. Set against these are favourable variances, most notably a lower than anticipated interest charged on loans, which has resulted in a favourable variance of £291,000. And as I mentioned earlier, the reduction in revenue contribution to capital of £2.551 million. And this is due to capital underspend and which has resulted in a reduced financing requirement. A major repairs reserve has also been called upon, first of all, meaning that the revenue contribution required is significantly less than budget. The HRA balance at the end of March is now £14.446 million, as shown in paragraph 5.7. Paragraphs 5.8 to 518 detail the position for the HRA capital programme, with Appendix A showing the actual capital expenditure, contractual commitments and carry forwards. The table in paragraph 5.10 provides a summary of the capital programme and shows a favourable variance of £403,000 against the budget of £29.436 million. The reasons for this are given in paragraphs 5.11. There's less planned maintenance carried out and also an underspend on IT projects. Actual capital expenditure was £11.693 million. Paragraphs 5.12 and 5.13 present the contractual commitments amounting to £8.159 million and the carry forwards of £9.181 million. I should caution that, as explained in paragraph 5.9, it is difficult to assess the level of payments that will be made during a particular financial year for complex capital schemes. Members should therefore focus on whether overall outcomes are being achieved as a result of the capital investment, rather than variances against the plan for any particular year. Finally, the HRA earmarked reserves are shown in Appendix B. The budget surplus of £1.506 million has been transferred to the Strategic Priorities Reserve, so the total reserves are now £14.446 million. So I propose the recommendations of paragraph 3 of the report. 3.1, at the 2019 to 2020 financial outturn as set out in this report be noted, that the transfer of £1.506 million, being the surplus for the year, is transferred to the Strategic Priorities Reserve, and that be approved. And that also the capital forward requests referred to in 5.12 and 5.13 are also approved. So may I have a seconder, please? Councillor Osborne. Thank you,
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm happy to second it.
Does anyone have any questions about the HRA outturn?
Yeah.
No? Okay,
yes.
Councillor Busby, yeah.
Top of page 41. It says, asbestos surveys. The increase in need for surveys has resulted in an adverse variance of 72,000. I can't believe that we're not, at this point, we're not aware of all the asbestos in our buildings. I mean, it's the requirement to know that has been around for donkey's years. How come are we still spending money finding these things out?
I think that I'll ask Gavin if he can provide an update on that. But asbestos is one of those things. It's not always possible to know exactly where it is until you come to do work on properties. But Gavin, do you have an answer for Councillor Busby, please?
If Gavin's not able to speak for whatever, can I suggest something?
Yes, Councillor Davis, go ahead.
And Dave, you're absolutely right. We probably do know an awful lot. However, I've got some properties in Shotley that have recently they're going through a process and now of being rebuilt. So and they were prefabs built just after the war, which we know a lot of asbestos in it. So I would suggest, and I don't know definitively, Gavin I think is on now, that those sort of properties are the type of things that will be causing us to have to get asbestos reports.
Thanks, Councillor. Gavin.
Good morning, Cabinet, and apologies for the technical issues. What I can say in relation to asbestos surveys is that we've always had a robust schedule of inspecting and carrying out asbestos removal works. And actually, when you grade asbestos, you get 3 levels: low, medium and high. And actually, we've eradicated all of the high and the majority of the medium asbestos in our homes. We do, I think, it's fair to say, take a risk-adverse approach to asbestos, and I think that's rightly so, because we all recognise the importance of getting it right. And as such, we do carry out quite extensive surveys as and when properties become void, and that those properties may or may not have had surveys in the past. We are taking a pragmatic view going forward. We are reducing our overall spend on our external contractors that we use, and members will be aware that towards the end of 2019, the Housing Service carried out a full review and restructure of its service, and as such we made the decision and appointed an additional asbestos surveyor. So that additional surveyor will now provide us with the opportunity to carry out far more survey work in-house rather than relying on external contractors, and then I therefore expect you to see a reduction in the overall cost to asbestos and asbestos management going forward.
Thanks, Gavin.
Thank you, Gavin.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate in your presentation you said that it's a complex beast, and I accept that. But nonetheless, in paragraph 5.6, we're showing an adverse variance in respect of receipts that were expected from development that hasn't come forward. So can I assume then that by definition we can expect at some point in the future a favourable variance? I mean, do we know when these new build completions will occur? Has it slowed down because of COVID? What's the reason for that? Do we know?
Gavin, would you like to provide Councillor Parker with a detailed response? So there has been a slowdown, obviously, with COVID, but
yes, sir.
Gavin. Gavin, are you able to provide Councillor Parker with?
Yes, sorry, Councillor Ward. Apologies. There seems to be a problem with the mute facility this morning.
He responds very slowly, unfortunately.
Yeah, just in response, I think it's recognised that what the HRA business plan attempts to do is accurately predict income and expenditure to any given in a given month, and therefore what has traditionally happened in the past, based on the explanations or assumptions being made by the affordable housing team developing and acquiring new housing, they're built into the business plan to a particular month. Clearly, there are always ongoing challenges with the development of new housing, and it's not just COVID related that may cause a delay. And therefore, as part of the HRA review this year, in terms of the business plan, we will be reviewing how we record and accurately predict future income from new build housing. What you're seeing is the lag of housing coming forward, and us thus being able to charge a rent, and obviously at £100 per week per property, you can see why that would build up quite significantly, quite quickly. So I acknowledge that what we need to do is be able to accurately predict that, and therefore work will take place as the business plan review to do that. I think in terms of COVID, we've not seen any immediate impacts. What we actually have seen, I know from a couple of schemes that I've been sitting on the periphery of, is actually developers wanting to expedite the transactions and actually want us to move from exchange to complete in less than 4 weeks, which isn't something that we've historically done on a particular scheme more recently. So I'm not sure that the effects have been seen as yet, but obviously we continue to work with developers that we may be acquiring through Section 106 or maybe bidding for housing to understand their situation.
Thanks, Gavin. Councillor Holt.
Yeah, question for Gavin, really. Obviously, the biggest adverse variance is the 613,000 for responsive repairs and maintenance. Can you just give us some background as to how come that's got to that figure, and what were the benefits to us as a council for spending that excess amount of money?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Holt, and thank you for the question in relation to building services. I was hoping someone was going to ask the question because actually I've developed a response which I think members will be happy with when they understand the bigger picture. Firstly, there's no excuse for the level of variances between Q3 and Q4, but I would summarise that between September last year and January this year, a significant restructure of the team took place, and that resulted in nearly a quarter of the housing service, including officers, being at risk. Inevitably, this has taken some time just to effect as roles and responsibilities change. In relation to building service more specifically, yes, there is a significant additional expenditure, and we've seen that in relation to subcontractors. If I take members back to the heady days before COVID-19, and if you looked back at April 19, we were obviously spending significant amounts on void contractors to carry out major works, and that was in result of decision making to reduce void times to an acceptable level. If you were to look at current performance reports, you will see that void performance is actually now well below the target of 21 days and on average is averaging around 14 to 15 days. If I take you forward from April 19, throughout last year, we saw a reduction in the amount of reliance on subcontractors to deliver voids as the building services team equipped itself to take that work and deliver that work on an ongoing basis. Yes, there will naturally be a need for subcontractors from time to time, but in relation to voids, there's been less reliance. If I catapult you to April this year and the beginning of lockdown, you could assume that actually that would have a significant impact on the building services team. Actually, across Babergh and Mid Suffolk, the team delivered and returned 60 empty properties during lockdown, where most obviously colleagues were working from home. And I think that's testament to the team and gives you a sense as the direction of travel that team using safe systems and work and clearly having to operate in a very different way, were able to return that number of voids to back to the council for letting. What we have recognised in relation to subcontractor spend is we do rely on a number of subcontractors for very specialist work. And an example of that would be perhaps windows and doors. And therefore, over the last 12 months, we've developed a training schedule for all staff in the service, which identifies the opportunity to provide additional training in relation to specialist roles, and therefore reduce our reliance on subcontractors. In addition to that, we have identified that some subcontractors are being used for large amounts of reactive work. And when I talk about reactive work, I'd refer to, for example, fencing repairs, fencing improvements, and members will be aware of the dramatic effects of a storm earlier this year in January, which exacerbated that problem. As such, what we've done as a result is we're developing capital programs of activity where we can let a contract for that activity and develop some economies of scale based on the volume of work being offered. And in the latter half of last year, beginning of this year, we've also been reviewing our contracts and identifying savings where possible. And examples of that have been delivered through our whole house servicing contract as well as our material supplier, Travers Perkins.
Thank you, Gavin. Does anyone else have a question on the Councillor McCraw?
I just wondered from Gavin, since he's on at the moment, there was a discussion prior to the shutdown that there would be further forthcoming changes in the model we're using for responsive repairs. I'd just like to ask if that's still under consideration or whether it's been put to one side until we deal with COVID-19 effects.
Thank you, Councillor McCraw. In answer to your question, I intend to bring back to a Cabinet briefing next Monday, in effect, a conversation with the Cabinet and present where we are in terms of our transformation of building services, and that will include decision making going forward about the delivery of that service. I think what I can in effect make you aware of, Councillor McCraw, is that during lockdown both Babergh and Mid Suffolk and Flagship Housing have made the decision to not proceed with the development of a business case around a joint venture, and as such the conversation with the Cabinet next week will be around what next in relation to that service, and how we take that service forward, investing in it to further enhance and improve the delivery of that service. I think it's important to recognise that year on year, over the last 3 years, the actual overall deficit for building services has and is reducing, and thus improving. And since January, more than 6,000 outstanding job tickets have been closed, which date back to 2017, thus leaving building services now with a normal level of work in progress.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thanks, Gavin. Councillor Holt.
Yeah, just following up, Gavin, on what you said. I mean, I think we all realise we had a problem with voids, and I think the work done to reduce that has been absolutely fantastic. And also to hear of the 60 empty houses that were brought back in during the COVID situation. Going forward, are we happy now that we can budget far better for this expenditure, and that we won't or shouldn't see such an adverse variance in the coming years?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Holt. Yes, I believe that particularly the delivery of the outstanding jobs will allow us to budget and predict our budget in a far more intuitive way, which I would expect you not to see the level of adverse variances. It is always difficult, particularly with the delivery of building services. For example, we may see a significant increase in the cost of materials, as we have done with certain materials since the result of COVID. But we are doing everything we possibly can to minimise cost and increase income. And I hope the presentation that I bring to you next Monday in a Cabinet briefing will summarise the interventions that have taken place and the progress that we want to make in terms of our plans going forward, which will give you more reassurance and certainty around budgets.
Thanks, Gavin. That's great. Right, if there are no further questions, then we'll move to the vote for this. You've had the recommendations proposed and seconded. Claire, can we take a vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Okay, again, when I call your names, for, against or abstain. Councillor Arfi?
For.
Councillor Busby?
For.
Councillor Davis?
For.
Councillor Holt?
For.
Councillor Malvisi?
For.
Councillor Osborne?
For.
Councillor Parker?
For.
And Councillor Ward?
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. Okay, then, moving on to the next item on the agenda.
I have got my hand up, actually.
Oh, you've only just put it up, though, haven't you?
Indeed, yeah. It was really just to give you full credit for your reports and presentations this morning. It's no criticism of your predecessors, but I have to say that you do have an impressively complete understanding of our budgets and our outturn figures. So thank you very much and well done.
Thank you, Councillor Arthur. That's well, it's made my day. Thank you. I wrote every word of those reports myself. Right, moving on. Where are we? Yeah. Okay, the next item is paper BCA 1955, the adoption of the revised table of fares for Hackney carriages. And I'd like to ask Councillor Malvisi to introduce this paper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, some background information. Local authorities set the maximum rate of the fares for Hackney carriages in their district. And the last time we did it in Babergh was in 2016. And no doubt everyone will agree that a lot's happened since then. The local authority has no power to set fares for private hire, where the vehicle must be pre-booked and the rate is set by the operator solely. Taxi meters and the corresponding fare table are calibrated in imperial units, although metric equivalents can also be shown. The calculation of these tariffs is complex and allows for being both stationary and moving. So the tariff comprises the flag fare, which is when you put your hand up and stop them on the road, waiting time, the drop time, and running time. And they're all interlinked. Increase one and it knocks the others out, which then makes it difficult to work in the meter. The aim is to achieve a reasonable income for the operator, taking into account all the costs of maintaining a vehicle to today's standards. But it is the operator's decision whether they charge the maximum fare or not. However, the meter must show the maximum fare allowed. Consultation started on the 5th of March, with statutory notices being published in the East Anglia Daily Times, at the council offices, as well as at customer access points within the district. And this is a requirement under Section 65 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976, Part 2. There were no responses from the public and only 12 from the trade, who, strangely enough, objected to the tariffs, and their comments are recorded in Appendix C, with the officers' comments in Appendix D. The current tariff sets a daytime rate and a nighttime rate, but at the moment on bank holidays, they charge either 50% or 100% to the daytime rate. And you think that's simple? Well, no, it's not, because some people apply it to the final fare, and some people apply it to the flag fare. So there's no consistency because it's a percentage that's being applied. And if it's 50 or 100% of the total fare, because the two will not arrive at the same figure. And I can tell you that I've experienced it. I've arrived back at Sudbury railway station on a bank holiday, and my fee with one taxi company was X, and then 2 weeks later, well, no, not 2 weeks later, a lot later, with another bank holiday, it was a different fare. Now, why do I remember? Because I was working and it was expenses, so I had to record it. So this is a problem for the fare payer who ends up doing the exact same trip but being charged different rates. Consequently, the primary aim of the review was to remove percentages as part of the equation from the Babergh tariff table, because it's now considered poor practice. And it is this historical use of percentages which resulted in the objections, because different operators applied it differently, and they saw the new proposal as a reduction in their wages, which it is not. Officers considered each objection and as a consequence presented the licensing committee with 4 alternative proposals on the 12th of June. And after much deliberation, the committee decided to recommend proposal 4, which is the one before you. Now, personally speaking, I believe that it was the complexity of the calculations, along with perhaps too many proposals, that resulted in a narrow majority, with some members of the committee abstaining because they did not fully comprehend the complex nature of what had been presented. But I very much hope that I have simplified the rationale for Cabinet today, and that therefore I am able to propose that you accept the revised table of fares to become effective 27th of July 2020, but also to be aware that the policies of hackney carriages and private hire for Babergh and Mid Suffolk are currently under review and will come before the Licensing and Regulatory Committee in October this year. The intention is that the new policy will require an annual review of tariffs to ensure that they remain in line with Consumer Price Index in the future. Although there will be a joint policy for Babergh and Mid Suffolk, the tariff tables are unlikely to be completely harmonised due to the nature of the districts. The most common journey types differ greatly. In and around Sudbury, they tend to be urban and short, whereas in Mid Suffolk, they tend to be rural and longer. And before I finish, I would like to say thank you to the team who number crunched and worked very diligently in pulling together what is a very complex scenario. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Malvisi. So you're proposing the paper.
Yes.
May I have a seconder, please? Well, I will be happy to second that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions from anyone? Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, my question is probably a bit of a basic one, but it's similar to the question that I think Sue Carpendale asked at licensing, and it's reading the updated Appendix E. The thing that I find a little bit difficult to understand is why we have to have variable amounts and distances. Why can't the amounts remain constant and the distances change, or the amounts change and the distances remain constant? If you look from tariff 1, 2 to 3, the subsequent distances are the same amount for different distances, which you would expect because they're different tariffs. But the normal rates, for some reason, the amount and the distance has to change with each, and I'm not quite sure why that's the case. It seems to be overly complicated.
I will ask Emma Richbell to respond to that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Malvisi.
She is, yes.
Yeah, I am here. Oh, I'm probably not showing my video. Let me do that. Councillor Arthur, I don't think I can give you a very simple answer to that, unfortunately. It's about making a workable tariff that works in the meter. It is difficult in that if you change one part of the tariff, it changes another. And so you have to almost play with, we have a spreadsheet that we put these figures into to ensure that the various elements of the tariff give a consistent running mile, for example, so that each mile after the first one, which is always more expensive because that includes your flag fare. After that, you want each extra mile that the passenger travels to cost the same. So you don't end up with an exponential increase for a long journey, for example. And you achieve that by that really quite fiddly adjustment of both yardage and cost. So yes, I agree with you. It does look very complicated, but what it hopefully gives is a tariff that to the person who actually pays the fare at the end is sensible.
And Emma, is it true to say that the net result of that between the tariffs 1, 2 and 3 is that you will get the overall 50% and overall 100% increase on the whole fare rather than just variable increases on components of the fare?
I wouldn't like to say that it's 50% or 100%, but what it achieves is a sensibly increased cost for your nighttime and your bank holiday charges. So yeah, I mean the difficulty with trying to compare, this is where a lot of the problem has come in trying to compare what the drivers will be getting with what they were getting, was because the tariffs were being applied in very different ways by different operators. So we almost can't say that's what they were charging and this is how it compares, because it's very difficult to know. There's been clearly very different interpretation from different operators. We understand now from discussion with one operator that he was actually choosing to charge the night rate for larger vehicles, which is actually an offence. But that's arisen from that confusion on how those percentages are to be applied. So it's a key element of what we try to do is to remove that confusion by taking the percentages out, which on the face of it, as you read the tariff, seems simple, but actually they've caused very, very many problems and a lot of variation, as Councillor Malvisi explained, in actually what you pay as a customer.
Thanks, Emma. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand from Liz's very good summary at the beginning that there's going to be a whole review of the licensing within Babergh in October. So given that the complex nature of this and the clear lack of understanding by many people, many parties. Why are we pushing this through now? Why can't the licensing fares be part of the bigger review, so then it all marries together and everybody will, hopefully will have a better understanding?
In October, we'll be reviewing the policy of both Mid Suffolk and Babergh, whereas now we're looking at the tariffs for Babergh. And this is an attempt to align and tidy up so that when we discuss and review the policies, it doesn't become bogged down and clouded, because this is such a complex issue on its own. It's better to be dealt with separately.
Thank you, Councillor RVC. Councillor Davis, are you okay with that response?
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't particularly agree with you, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I just think clearly from all the correspondence that we've had that this is, and everyone's admitted it's a complex issue, and I just think it's worthy of further discussion and actually working out what is the best for the operators and for the customers. And I noticed that there were no responses from the public. It's probably because they don't understand it either, and I just think it needs to be a lot clearer and a lot better so people know what they're getting here in Babergh. And I don't particularly buy the fact that Sudbury is different to Stowmarket in terms of it's urban and then rural, because Babergh's a very rural area as well, and if you happen to be getting off the train at Sudbury and you live, I don't know, Toppersfield, it's just as rural, surely. That wasn't a question, it was rhetorical.
Yeah, I gathered.
Yeah. Councillor Holt.
Yeah, thank you. I think this just highlights that at the original committee, the presentation, the papers that were presented to the members, we've had it admitted that there were some issues with the papers, and it's clear from listening to the committee that there are at least 4 members who admitted that it was far too complex for them, and they even requested further training to actually understand what they were meant to be passing in front of them. To me, this should go back to committee. It should be made a lot clearer. Yes, there was a consultation with the operators. There was letters sent in, 12, I think, was the number quoted. But we've had a further 10 companies since that sending emails, whether it be under one email or separate emails, who just can't and don't agree with what is proposed. At the end of the day, these are the operators. These are the people who are in business to provide us with a taxi service and our residents with a service that we all need and we all use occasionally. The bottom line is, if those operators don't feel and the drivers don't feel that there is a living to be made out of this, we will lose it. We will lose the availability of taxis at night. We will lose the availability of taxis after midnight, bank holidays, and it's going to hit us all. It will hit our residents. It will hit our economy, which is very important to me. And I just think that this paper, it needs to be rethought. It needs to go back. It needs further consultation. We need to try and get agreement with the operators of a system that is implemented, whether it's a lack of explanation from our point of view to the operators of how it's meant to work, how it's meant to be implemented, the meters used, whether they can be adjusted, whether, I don't know. But to me, there is not enough common ground for both parties to proceed with this. It needs to be clear to the operators what they are going to be meant to be implementing. Yes, the ones I've spoken to, and I've spoken to 3 separate companies, they're not, I mean, they live in the real world. They're not looking for huge increases. It's not about that. The main concern for the operators has been for their customers, how they are going to price and how they are going to charge their customers. The second thing was their drivers, not profit, drivers. So it's customers first, drivers second. How are they going to retain the drivers? The drivers themselves have looked at this. It is complicated. I don't think any of us really get it, but it's complicated. And those drivers are already talking about it isn't going to be worth their while doing the job. You have no drivers in the evening. You have no drivers at night. You have no drivers at bank holidays. We have no cabs. So the third thing was, yes, they would like an increase. Their costs have gone up over the 4 years since it was last done. So they're not being driven by profit. They're not being driven by greed. They're being driven by a system that at the moment has been put in front of them that is far too complex. Either, as I say, it needs explaining to them, but we need to get a meeting with them. We need to get this thrashed out, have an agreement on a way forward. As I say, it's not about profit, not from the companies I've spoken to, and we need to get this sorted so that everyone's happy and we get the service that we want and our residents need.
Thank you, Councillor.
Can I respond?
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Holt. You say it's not about profit, but they've said that they're not going to make the money on bank holidays and Christmas, so they're not prepared to drive. Therefore, that's profit, and that would indicate greed. I don't know.
No, it's not. I'm sorry. I'm not going to listen to that.
10,
that is not.
Finish, please.
That is not. I'm sorry, but that is not right.
Councillor Mavesi, please continue.
Yeah, the extra 10 we've received, I don't know whether they are extra to the 12 that responded, or whether they all overlap with those that originally responded. But I do hear what you're saying. It is complex. It's something that I've come across before, not for taxi carriage tariffs, but for queuing theory, how retailers work out exactly how many tills they're going to have in a given store. But I do think some of the language is a little bit emotive, and I don't think that serves anybody's purpose. I do hear what you're saying and what others have said, that perhaps we need to get round the table and actually work through it. I presume the meters they're designed by somebody else, and they're set to take a running mile, a drop, a waiting time, a flag fare. And it's that combination of those elements that produce the subtotal that seems to be causing the problem.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Parker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I concur wholeheartedly, actually, with Councillor Holt on this one, and I will just say, Chair, we're used to receiving any amount of representation around things, particularly, for example, around, say for the planning function, for example. We've received a good deal of representation from operators over the last few weeks about this, and seldom do you see representation that is so consistent. And it is the operators, it's the experts that are telling us that this is the most complicated of tariffs that are being introduced here. So I've no doubt that the intention here is all with good intentions. I'm sure that is the case, but it's not clear, and if it's not transparent, then it's not fair. And so for that reason alone, I mean, I think in the conversation that we're having here shows that we ourselves are struggling to understand the complexity of this. So therefore, on a technical basis alone, I can't support this paper as it stands, I'm afraid. And we're going to need to come back, and we're going to need to listen a little bit more to the operators. So that's my comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arthur, is your hand still up from last time, or?
No, it's up again.
I thought it might be.
I hadn't finished last time.
Oh, okay.
But a couple more things have cropped up in the discussion. The first one, I think somebody mentioned something about how we hadn't heard anything from passengers. Well, I don't think we would have done, really. I mean, most of us, when we use a taxi, we get in, we watch the meter, and when we get out, we pay. I suspect that if anybody has a question about the tariffs and the fares, it's the driver that has to answer the question. Very few people would get out of a taxi and then contact the local authority to get some explanation of their fare. So it does have to be understood, I think, by the drivers, and it should be as clear as possible. Another question that arose out of what Councillor Parker was saying is about consistency, really. So do we know what other districts are doing? I read one of the supporting, well, actually, I don't think it was a supporting paper. It was something sent through by one of the respondents, I think Fox Cabs or something, which was about how this is a sort of the intention is to get some sort of cross-boundary agreement. I think not necessarily national, but the intention is to get some consistency. So I just wondered if we knew what other districts were doing. And finally, it's a question about what the operators have to do as a result of the change, because of course their meters either, I guess, have to be reprogrammed or something, or do they have to have new meters? And it seems from some of the correspondence that we've had that the meter companies have to accommodate all manner of tariffs being charged all over the country. So that really goes back to my question resulting from Councillor Parker's comments, and that is about consistency. Are we coming in line with a sort of a recognised way of doing things, or are we just going it alone and all the other districts are going to do the same and it will be just as mixed up as it was before?
Thanks, Councillor Arthey. Emma,
can I answer part of it?
Okay, then.
It does bring us in line with most of the other councils.
Thank you.
And the other thing is that, yes, the meters have to be recalibrated.
Emma or David, can you provide some more detail on that? And because it touches on one of the questions I've got, and that is how easy would it be to recalibrate the meters for the three different tariffs that we've got in Appendix E?
It's a straightforward matter for the meter agents to program in the tariff that's provided to them, and actually it's a much more straightforward matter to program with the tariff that we're presenting here than to use one with percentages, which then has to be interpreted.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Arthey, have the responses from Councillor Malvisi and Emma covered most of what you asked about, or is there anything you've still got outstanding on that?
Yeah, I think they have. I would just like some sort of confirmation about the other districts. Are they going through the same thing at the same time as us? Because I'm guessing that there are operators who don't follow district boundaries. So I'm guessing that there are some operators that operate in more than one district. So it would be quite useful to know that there's consistency across districts.
Emma, are you able to?
Yeah.
I might ask David to respond actually on that one, but I believe, I mean, it's a local issue for local authorities to set their own tariffs, and a Hackney driver is bound by the tariff set by his district, regardless of where he trades. But David might be able to expand a little on that.
Thanks, Emma.
David. Thank you, Chair. Yeah. I'm going to keep my camera off, if I may, and play audio because my computer's acting up today.
Okay, thank you.
We obviously have a look at each individual council. The rest of the Suffolk we look at when we're calculating our fares. I've had a chat with other councils. Obviously, Ipswich did theirs last year. East Suffolk are looking to do theirs. Obviously, it might not be imminent, but it'll probably be in if not this year, it'll be next year. And West have already looked at theirs in previous years. We're behind.
Thank you.
Can I just say that doesn't quite answer the question? I wasn't asking when they did it. I was asking what they did.
Oh, what, in terms of having a tariff structure similar to the one we're proposing in order to iron out some of the previous anomalies over percentages?
Yeah, quite.
That's a good question. David, are you able to pick up on that?
Yes, Chair, I am. The only council that has percentages within it is East, and that is, I believe, the South District that has a percentage within its tariff table. Nobody else has percentages within their tariff table.
So they all have separate tariffs for to cover night time and bank holidays.
Yes, they do.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Mervisi, for your introduction. It did shine a little bit of light on it. I actually concur with Councillor Holt and Councillor Parker. I'm being asked to make a decision on a subject that I really am finding very, very complex, and I would much rather I was much better informed before I voted this through. I would rather it be put on hold for the time being, be deferred and come back to us when I, for one, have a much better understanding of what I'm actually voting through. This is a very important subject. It needs us to understand that subject before we can actually take a vote, either approve or to refuse. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I go on to Councillor McCraw, I just got one quick question myself, if I may, and that's concerning the hourly waiting time charge, which apparently, as a result of the new tariff, is going to reduce from £15 to £10.90 per hour. Can either Emma or David, can you confirm that that's the case, and if so, why, and what else is in the new proposed tariffs to offset against that?
David, did you want to respond to that one? My understanding is that the waiting time overall is increased, but could you explain that one for the Cabinet, please?
Yes, Chair. In terms of each particular tariff, the running mile will increase by, in the proposed alternative to the one that went out to consultation, there's a proposed increase in running mile, which is the subsequent mile thereafter the initial mile, of 20p extra, so it's a 180 running mile instead of a 160, and an £18 waiting time in tariff 1 instead of a 15, or in terms of what went out, £11. In tariff 2, the night rate, there is an increase in running mile of another 20p again, to £2.60, and a much bigger increase to £24 from £22.50, what is being charged out there. And tariff 3, there is another 20p increase on the running mile to £3.40 instead of £3.20, and a bigger jump of £6 on the waiting charge in tariff 3 instead of £30.
So why is it some of the operators are suggesting that their hourly waiting time is reducing significantly, and they've calculated it at being £10.90 per hour rather than the current 15? How did have they miscalculated that, or can you explain why they believe that's the case?
Can I answer that, Chair?
Yes, certainly. Please, David.
That was in the original proposed tariff that went out to consultation. Officers found an error within the in the tariff and recalculated it, whereby it then dropped to £11 per hour instead of £15. That went out to consultation. We took on board all the trade's responses and came up with some work proposals. In those work proposals, tariff 4 was perceived to be the best because it gave a lot more to the trade. It gave an increase on their running mile. It gave an increase on their waiting time. So they were actually getting more now than what they were getting before.
Right. Okay. So those responses from the trade are based on old figures and not the latest Appendix E.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor McCraw was next on the list.
I'd suggest I defer to Cabinet members first, Chair, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Yes. Yeah. Councillor Busby.
Thanks. Just to confirm that I'm looking at the right thing, is it the the tariff one is 320 for the first 585 yards, and then tariff 2 is 460 for the first 544 yards. Is that the one I'm looking at? Is that the right one?
Yes. Yeah, that's the latest the revised Appendix E that was it's attached separately in the modern.gov, and it was sent out as a separate email on.
Yes, just not labelled as Appendix E. Anyway, I mean, that just seems crazy. I think I agree with the deferring of this to look at it. To have 3 separate lengths, why don't we just have a fixed charge to start with? £4 for the first one, £5 for the second, £6, whatever it is. And if they want to go 1 yard, then they still pay the £4 plus whatever the additional yardage is. I mean, it just seems crazy. And then to go to all that trouble of saying it's 20p per additional passenger in excess of 2. Are we really getting down to that kind of level where we're worrying about 20p? If so, again, I think that should be built into the charge. I mean, I would have thought. I mean, I don't use taxis very often, but when I have, is it £10, £11, £12? It's not. Is it £12.45? And how come you've got the extra 45p? You don't kind of worry about the pences so much. It's what kind of pound figure. And then we've got this in the extra charges. How can you explain this? 60p each additional passenger in excess of the first 2 additional passengers incurring 20p above in vehicles licensed to carry more than 4 passengers only. Blimey. Well, I mean, you've got to have a degree in maths to work some of these things out. Why are we still dealing in yards? Why is it kind of tenths of miles? I don't know. The whole thing looks overcomplicated. It's...
Points taken, Councillor Busby. I mean, it is common practice to charge for extra passengers separately like that. So that's not something that's unusual, and you find that everywhere, I think.
But some taxi firms do and some don't. So it is down to the operator to choose. But it's in imperial measurements because of some act of parliament, which escapes me. We choose to do things on our roads in yards, miles, feet and inches, but we buy clothes in centimetres. I don't know.
I'm not
the lawmaker.
Okay, moving on. Councillor Holt.
Marks and Spencers, yeah. I go back to the original committee and the papers presented to the members of that committee. I think there was errors. We all admit there was errors in there. The papers they were looking at had errors. I don't see how we can expect to approve a paper that was passed by them when we all admit and that there were errors in that paper. If that wasn't correct, it should go back to that committee for them to look at a properly put together a document. But before that, I stressed that I would seriously consider having a forum with the taxi operators to ensure that whatever is put together is something that they're happy to operate with. I'm not saying we have to do what they want, by no means, but we need to take their opinions on board. You might say we have done, but with what we've been presented, I don't think it really reflects what the concerns were. If anything, it's unearthed more problems going forward. So I would certainly defer this, and I would ask that we engage with the operators so that we can come to a mutual agreement and put that back to the committee and then come back to Cabinet. Because just that conversation, Chair, that you had with the officer, again, that just illustrates that, you know, that was similar to the committee meeting, that there was no clear answers, that you have information in front of you or referring to information that was incorrect. And Appendix E that's just come out, I mean, it's not a document that any of the operators, I would imagine, would have seen, possibly if they'd have been looking at it. But I just can't support this. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Busby, your hand's still up. Do you have another question?
No, sorry.
Okay.
Can I ask the Assistant Director to comment on it, please? on our discussions.
Yeah.
Cass is
Emily.
there, I think.
Also, Emily has got her hand up as well.
All right. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. If I might just jump in there. Listening to the debate and anticipating the direction that the Cabinet might want to go in on this matter, you have a proposal that's been seconded that you would need to take a vote on to accept the recommendation in the paper. If that's voted against, then ultimately you're left with a situation of no change. So if the Cabinet's desire is to send this back to the Licensing Committee for further consideration, which would be your appropriate route to have those more detailed, complex debates, then actually it would be best for the current motion to be withdrawn by the proposer and seconder, and for an alternative motion to be put, which would be to refer the matter back to committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Emily. Cass, did you want to say a few things at this point?
Good morning, Cabinet. Thank you very much for bringing me into the discussion. So I just wanted to summarise. I think Emily's probably caught the direction pretty well there, but I did just want to summarise exactly what would happen for Cabinet. So and a little bit of clarity about what has happened. So where the trades were thinking that the tariff was unfair, that was absolutely fed back through the statutory consultation that was done via the Licensing Committee. It was that consultation response that the team worked on, and the tariff that's before you today, as David indicated, each section of that tariff has been increased based on the consultation received back. So I can understand absolutely everyone's commented that this is a complex item. I completely agree. If this were to go back to Licensing Committee, which it seems is the way you're going, it was just to clarify that this tariff that you are seeing today is the tariff that officers are suggesting to Licensing Committee, and that the majority did vote on to come to Cabinet. So the work that would go on at Licensing Committee would be to make sure that this is completely transparent and understood by everybody. It wouldn't be a different tariff, it wouldn't be different figures that are going, because everything that's been shown to you today is in response to the original consultation. It's had the errors removed, and I do apologise that there were errors there, but the errors have been removed. So just to clarify, it would be the tariff that you're looking at today is what we would go back to Licensing Committee and ensure everybody was fully understood of how those figures and all those formulas have been come to. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Cass. Councillor Busby. Your hand's popped up again.
I'm not certain that's what we want. I think we're saying that the tariff that's been recommended here is overcomplicated. We need somebody to rethink it and come up with a simpler one.
Okay.
I think the way the tariff is arrived at is determined by the Hackney carriage scheme, which is a running mile, a drop, a flag fare, and yeah, those elements have to be satisfied and met and put into the meter. I don't think the complexity of the calculation is one that we can run away from, because it seems to be determined by the way Hackney carriages are set up and run on a meter.
Yeah, I hear that, but we've got three different tariffs, and as Clive said right at the start, you've got a different amount and a different amount of yards for each tariff. That isn't necessary. You could have a different amount, but for the same yards, or the same amount and for, do it the other way around. I don't think you need to have different amounts for different yards. That just seems crazy, especially when you're making it 585 yards and 462 yards. The distances are irrelevant.
The proposal is a tariff on the day rate. In other words, the proposal in front of Cabinet is what was decided by the Licensing Committee, which is not a selection of 4 different tariffs. They narrowed it down to one tariff. And what I'm asking Cabinet is to either decide that we do nothing, which I don't think is the way forward, or to accept the proposal of the licensing committee. What I hear from you is that you would like to you would like me to withdraw the proposal and suggest that we take it back to the licensing committee so that we can simplify the terminology and the narrative so that more people can understand. But we can't change the way the actual meter is set up.
And we're not asking that. As I said,
it would simplify, but we've only got one tariff. We've only got essentially one tariff. So it's a day rate, a night rate, and a bank holiday rate.
Well, that's 3 tariffs.
Well,
okay.
Well,
that's what we. Yeah. I'm going to get Arthur to come in a minute because he's put his hand up before I go to Councillor Holt. But Councillor Busby, we do need that. We do need to have the separate day, night, and bank holiday rates. And the way that the current tariffs have been calculated is to remove the application of percentages and bake those into those nighttime and bank holiday tariffs. So that principle, I think, is a valid principle. The question is whether
can I just come in here, Mr. Chairman? The changes in yardage for the day rate against the night rate against the bank holiday rate is because by changing the distance that you travel is the way that you increase the tariff to the benefit of the driver.
Yeah, well, exactly.
So if you drive 100, then your system would require either the nighttime rate goes from 20 pence to 40 pence or 50 pence, which is probably a bit more difficult for that to be calibrated into the system. Whereas if you apply it on the distance travelled, you keep the unit cost the same, but you're getting to the destination.
Well, look, I'm not a taxi operator, but have any of the operators come in and said, yeah, we like this?
And this is where we, as part of the work that if we have a revised proposal to vote on today, part of that will be to ensure that we do go back to the operators and try to explain with worked examples how the tariff system that has been proposed will work to their benefit and how it could be implemented. So there are a number of things that clearly we've got to do, but and it may be that we end up with some a revised tariff as a result of those discussions. But the principle of trying to erase application of percentages by building those increases into separate tariffs for night and bank holidays does, from everything I've heard from Councillor Malvisi, from Emma and from David, that does make sense, but we just got to make sure we get it right. Arthur, would you like to say something at this point?
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm conscious that Councillor McCraw hasn't had a chance to come in, but I'm also very mindful of the fact that you're in danger of all going around in circles. And clearly you have a licensing committee to do the majority of this work for you so that you don't have to have this kind of debate and all become licensing experts, and particularly taxi licensing experts in Cabinet. Councillor Malvesi said most of what I was going to say, but she stopped just short. And I think the key thing for you, Chairman, is whether Councillor Malvesi is withdrawing the report, and I believe you seconded it, and so whether you're also withdrawing your seconding, in which case it will take the path that Ms. Yule outlined in terms of going back to the licensing committee. Otherwise, I think I would suggest you now proceed to the vote. But I think the mood of the Cabinet appears to be in the other direction, which is to withdraw and allow time for it to be reconsidered.
Thank you. Councillor Holt, did you want to quickly say something before we wrap this up?
Yes, I mean, from where we're going, it's going to be withdrawn. But I do stress, I think we need to engage with the operators to ensure that whatever is put back to the licensing committee is something that all parties can work with. It was interesting. Obviously, the licensing committee were put in front of, or what was put in front of, was a paper drawn up by officers, and I wonder where the steer came for those officers to actually go down this route and change it so drastically. I appreciate that other authorities have been doing this, but it was quite conscious that East Suffolk, I think it was, weren't going along these lines. And the other thing that hasn't been mentioned is type of vehicles, whether 4-seater, 6-seater, and the specialist vehicles. I can't really see the charges where the specialist vehicles come into it either. So I'd like some more clarity on that in the new paper, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Holt. Right. Oh, Councillor Arthur, your hand's gone up again.
Yeah, it's really probably a question for Emma. The proposal was that the new tariffs would come in at the end of this month. The paper also says that it's been 4 years since they were last reviewed. So really the question is, does another 2 months cause a problem?
Probably not in that respect. Councillor Marvisi? All right, Emma, sorry.
I was just going to say that what's coming before committee in October is the taxi policy, which isn't specifically tariffs. So this was an opportunity to give as soon as possible an increase to the trade, which necessarily will be delayed now. We'll hope that delay can be as short as possible.
Thank you.
Can I still comment, Chair?
Yes, Councillor McCraw, of course.
And perhaps I should have brought this in sooner, but it refers back to a point made by Councillor Arthey regarding practice elsewhere. And I've heard mention of Sudbury, of Hadley, East Suffolk, Mid Suffolk. One area I haven't heard mention of is the fact that on our southern border, many of the residents will be using taxi firms based in Tendring and perhaps even Colchester. And the practice there might be of interest. I don't know whether that's been considered or not, but I think it should be. And all I can say is that over my years of experience of using Manningtree cabs of various things and operators working there, one thing I have noticed is the difficulty they have in the retention of drivers. And that's under whatever system they are using. Drivers disappear, sometimes come back, but it's undoubtedly a really challenging business to be in. And I don't think we can be doing anything that's going to get in the way of a provision of any taxi service. It needs to be encouraged and supported as far as we can, at the same time supporting the residents. I just wanted to throw that in because I thought that is actually a significant portion of usage of taxis revolves around railway stations, and Manningtree Station is rather a critical one in this instance. So that's just it. All I'd have to say is I think you have a very difficult task in front of you.
Thank you, Councillor. And you're quite right. Then the last thing we want to do is to implement a system that's going to result in many drivers leaving the business and consequently the lack of availability of taxis. That will not do any of our residents any good whatsoever. Right, Councillor Holt, your hand is still up. You got something final thing you want to say? No. Right. Okay. Councillor Marvisi, then.
Can I propose then that we withdraw this paper today?
Yes.
And that we send it back to the licensing committee. But do we at this point have to clarify what we want the licensing committee to do? Yes.
I think you're right.
So,
Emily, can you provide some guidance, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So there are two parts that you need to do to get a motion that you want to take forward in this situation. The first is that Councillor Malvisi needs to withdraw the motion that's on the table that you have seconded, Chair. And then you will need to put forward a separate motion that says you would like to refer the matter back to the licensing committee, and it would be helpful if you added some context to that to include your requirements for some further consultation or some further engagement might be the more appropriate word with the trades. At least you just need to say that the proposal is that the matter be referred back to the licensing committee. At best, if you could also add some context as to what you would like them to do with the matter, that would be beneficial. But the first point is to withdraw the existing motion. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Emily. So, Councillor Marvisi, you're formally withdrawing the motion.
Yes, I am.
And as your seconder, I concur with that. So we can withdraw that motion. So we now need to word a replacement motion, which, as Emily said, would be to refer to licensing with further engagement.
For further engagement. Well, I've got some notes here. That it returns to licensing for further engagement with the industry and to better understand the tariff structure when compared with others in the area.
Yes. Yeah. Do we want to add any principles that we understand and accept that the need to remove the application of percentages as a separate charging mechanism, and to have a structure that does build in percentages? I think we do, because percentages don't always give you the answer that you want. Exactly. But it needs to be something that is simple.
But I think
clear.
The justification needs to be supported by empirical evidence on why it should be removed.
Okay, well, can we say something like that in the revised proposal then?
Yeah. Are you asking me or are you asking Emily for clarification?
Well, I was asking you to just jot down some words while I ask Councillor Arthey. He's just put his hand up.
Yeah, do you want me to go now?
Yeah, please.
Okay, well, I'm thinking not just about the operators that operate in our district, but I'm also thinking about the residents that live in our district and the taxis they might use. So can we please ask that licensing committee look at comparisons, and particularly, or to include, Colchester, Ipswich, Tendring and West Suffolk. And then, of course, there's the question of what Mid-Suffolk do. So I'm not quite sure how that ties in. Are Mid-Suffolk considering this later on this week or something?
Thank you. I've got Arthur and Emily who put their hands up. I think, Arthur, yours was first.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'll be brief and hopefully won't cut across what Emily wishes to say. But all I was going to say is I would recommend you keeping your new recommendation as simple and as short as possible. The detail that you are getting into would arguably be tying the hands of the licensing committee. As I said earlier, they're there to do the role for you in that respect. But in any event, the detail of this debate, which of course is all recorded and able to watch back, will set out in all of the issues that you've raised, and therefore give suitable context to the committee without you needing to try and build those into the recommendation itself.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if I were to suggest, I just want to get my wording right, so maybe Emily can help me here, that I propose that the paper return to the licensing committee for clarity and transparency of the tariffs.
And the engagement aspect of it as well.
For engagement, clarity and transparency of the tariff.
And simplification, if we can get it done in.
Chair, can I offer some words to the Cabinet member?
Yeah.
So a suggested proposal might be that the matter be referred back to the licensing committee for further consideration and engagement with relevant stakeholders, with a view to simplifying and making clearer the table of fares.
Sounds perfect.
That sounds very good, Emily.
You've got the job.
Right, I've got Councillor Holt and then Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I think from what Emily said, I think that's worded reasonably well. I do stress that the main thing here is engagement with operators to come to, or try and find a mutual way forward, a mutual way forward that we can present a paper back to committee that reflects both the wishes and the benefits to our residents, our operators, and obviously to the council.
Thank you. Councillor Arthey.
It was really just to agree with what our Chief Executive has said. Let's leave it up to licensing to sort it out. We're going to send it back to them and see what they come back to us with.
Yeah. Okay. Right. We've had the wording provided by Emily. Councillor Malvisi, are you
I'm
prepared
happy. I think now we move to, I propose that we withdraw the paper.
Yeah.
And if somebody can second me.
I'll second you on that.
Thank you.
So, Claire, do we take a vote on that withdrawal before we vote on Emily's new proposed? We don't need to, do we?
No, Chair,
No.
we just need to vote on the new proposal.
Right. Okay.
If I can remember the new proposal, that I propose that the paper returns to the licensing committee.
With Emily, do you want to send those words to Councillor Malvisi?
How will it come?
Chair, if we can just take the proposal as suggested by the monitoring officer, and then we'll pick up the exact wording from the transcript of the meeting.
Right, fine, thank you.
Okay.
So do you propose that, Councillor Malvisi?
I do.
And I second that. Claire, can you take a vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Arfi.
For.
Councillor Busby.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Holt.
For.
Councillor Malvisi.
For.
Councillor Osborne.
For.
Councillor Parker.
For.
And Councillor Ward.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. That was quite a useful debate, I felt, and hopefully we'll have a way forward soon that will satisfy everyone. Right, moving on to the next item on the agenda. That's paper BCA 1956, CCTV arrangements in Sudbury and Hadley. And I'd like to call on Councillor Davis to introduce this, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. This report summarises the current challenges and impacts of an obsolete CCTV system in Sudbury and Hadley, the options available to the council as developed by an officer working group, and most importantly, the conversations and the agreements reached with both our town councils as these options have been developed further. There is consensus among the partnership that investment is necessary, that a modern CCTV system in both towns would support the visions of prosperity for Sudbury and Hadley, and plans that would help them to deliver a vibrant economy and thriving visitor destination. Both towns have identified CCTV infrastructure as one of the means to deter and reduce crime and disorder, assist with antisocial behaviour enforcement activity, improve public perceptions of the town centres, and assist in attracting inward investment. This view is shared by the police, who have been working with us as we develop our approach. It is important for Cabinet to note that both town councils are willing to enter into a formal partnership with the councils and to contribute to its annual running costs. This would be an unprecedented arrangement. The culmination of conversation has been going on since autumn. I'd like to place on record my thanks to the time and commitment for all these negotiations with various officers, David Clark from the communities team in particular, my fellow councillor Jan Osborne, who has worked really hard in Sudbury, and both Mick Fraser and Catherine Grand in Hadley. I think it's important to note those, as well as the police and of course the town council members of staff. Cabinet will see that officers have considered 4 different options: removing the system altogether, in effect turning it off, keeping things as they are, but accepting the system will fail at some point soon, carrying out partial upgrades to the camera within the current control centre at Sudbury Police Station, and the preferred option of upgrading the CCTV equipment to the most up-to-date and modern specification, but also transferring the monitoring and maintenance to West Suffolk Council, who are full compliant control centre. We've explained that current CCTV systems were installed in 2000. It comprises 24 fixed cameras, 17 in Sudbury and 7 in Hadley, and they are mainly based at the 2 town centres. We have had a cohort of volunteers since 2000 and monitored. However, there's been 3 volunteers left, and recruitment of more volunteers has always been problematic. There are various options that we can go forward to in terms of the financing. This would include using SIL, and as I said, the town councils have offered to help with those as well. And I'm happy to answer and deal with any questions.
Thank you, Councillor. May I have a seconder for this? Councillor Osborne. Right. Questions. Councillor Arthey.
No, I was actually raising my hand to second it. You were looking for a seconder. But whilst I'm talking, I'd just like to say I think it's fantastic that we're going to get this sorted out, and I fully support it. Money coming from SIL, money coming from capital reserves, whatever. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne. Has gone. Councillor Holt.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to credit Councillor Davis on this paper. I think it is long overdue, and I think by modernising this, it will help and reassure residents, certainly in the town centres, that they've got protection during the evening and during the day and at night time. One other thing I'd just like to ask Councillor Davis is, will there be some provision for mobile cameras for our industrial estates where unfortunately we do have crime, and at the moment they're not protected at all by CCTV? So can I have some clarity that both in Hadley and Sudbury there will be the option to have mobile cameras that will protect our businesses on industrial estates?
This is something the police have asked for as well, because obviously it's a lot easier for them to be able to use the mobile cameras in hotspots, as it were, away from the actual town centres. But that doesn't detract from the actual town centre CCTV. But it's something we're working very closely with the police.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Busby.
Just in terms of funding, is there any money that we can get from the police, since it seems to be to their benefit as much as anybody's?
No.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to try, Dave, but no.
Well, they've been handed loads of money recently, haven't they? I mean,
well, I think Mr. Passmore obviously understands the importance of CTV in various areas, but they are extremely short. And obviously, although it's not a statutory requirement by the councils, it's something we work very closely with, because, as mentioned in the little preamble, it is about the vision and prosperity of the town, of those particular towns as well.
Thanks. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to give thanks to the officers as well for their hard work in bringing this forward, and in particular Councillor Davis, who has worked tirelessly to make sure that this comes forward in a reasonable time. So thank you for that, Derek. I'm very pleased to see this coming forward for obvious reasons. I've been trying to get this agreed for several years now, so I'm really pleased that this has now come to Cabinet. I would also, Councillor Holt has made reference to mobile cameras. I think this is a really excellent idea. I know Housestead have got a similar system, and they also, we could use them in Sudbury for hotspots, but they also loan them out at a charge to their local parish councils to use in their particular areas as well. So there would be a possible stream of revenue from that as well. Secondly, can I just mention, Derek, that I understand that the contract, once this is approved today, which hopefully it will be, the contract will take 12 to 18 months. Is there any way that we can progress this so that the contract is much quicker than that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, well, here we've got the chief executive on board, and Tom, so perhaps they'll be able to make sure that it happens a bit quicker. But of course, these are complex legal documents that our legal team have to deal with. So I'd love to see it a lot quicker. But there's a lot of different parties involved, so it may not be that simple.
Thanks, Councillor Davis. Councillor Holt, your hand's still up. Do you have another question?
Sorry, no, I will drop it.
Okay. I've got a quick question, Councillor Davis, and that's concerning the costs. And obviously, this is not cheap, and the setup costs are quite considerable. The running costs are quite considerable, and it's good that Sudbury Town Council has agreed to allocate £10,000 a year towards running costs, and Hadley Town Council it says have provided similar undertakings. I don't know if that means £10,000 or that they will contribute to running costs at an indeterminate amount. But is there any chance of actually getting those two town councils to, certainly for Sudbury, to contribute more? 10,000 in terms of the overall costs is a fairly small amount, yet the town will benefit quite considerably from this. I would have thought that it's something that we could reasonably expect them to contribute a significantly increased amount of money, rather than just £10,000. They are obviously, as we know, able to change their precept in ways that we can't with our council tax. So have we gone back to approach Sudbury to ask them for more?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to presume to talk about Sudbury's budget. I think that is something that maybe Jan could answer, all, but certainly the town council. But what I would say is, of course, SIL will come out of Babergh's money, but also the various councils that have their own particular SIL money. So I'm sorry, I can't give you a better answer than that.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, is it something we could go back to Sudbury and ask them for more?
Well, I think David Clark has done some really good negotiating anyway. It's certainly something that we could discuss, pick up and take forward. Yep. But I think with the paper as it is, if we agree with this today, and then obviously the finer details will be dealt with as we go forward.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I'm not in a position at Babergh Cabinet to speak on behalf of the Town Council. I have been present at meetings where they've discussed this funding, and I can assure you that they would not be prepared to increase that amount of £10,000, I think, which is going to be their contribution at this point. Obviously, it's open to discussions at later stage. I know they're looking for some sort of service level agreement, but I think there would be a reluctance from the Town Council to increase that contribution.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Parker.
Yeah, just on that theme, I think, Joe, I don't think we need to get too bogged down in that at this stage, to be honest, only because the application from SIL ought to take up the lion's share of this application, I would have thought. But interestingly on that, just as a matter of interest, will that be, presumably that'll be a Babergh only application for SIL, or would that be some sort of hybrid application? Do we know?
Well, I think possibly to answer Councillor Busby's point earlier on, obviously the police can dip into SIL as well or make applications. So I think it would probably be a hybrid. I'm not saying definitively the police, but certainly from Babergh, we would know. I think Tom's on the line. He may be able to throw some more light on that.
Tom?
Sorry, just getting my video and audio turned on. The bid, as anticipated, for SIL monies would come from Babergh, and the system would be owned by Babergh, unless we get a steer from councillors that you'd like a joint arrangement in terms of ownership. But that hasn't been something that either town council have kind of really jumped at. I think they were okay to put a revenue contribution towards it, but weren't seeking longer term ownership of the equipment itself. So the SIL bid will be for the capital equipment, so it'll be for the cameras, the wiring, the high-speed broadband links and those kind of things. So it'll be for the physical infrastructure, and then the revenue costs will come from an arrangement between Babergh, Sudbury and Hadley.
Okay, thank you. Right. If there are no more questions, then we can move to a vote, I think. Claire.
Okay. Once again, for, against or abstain. Councillor Arfi.
For.
Councillor Busby.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Holt.
For.
Councillor Malvisi.
For.
Councillor Osborne.
For.
Councillor Parker.
For.
And Councillor Ward.
For.
That's unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Claire. Right, we're moving on to the last item, and for that we have to exclude the public as it's a confidential item. And so to consider whether, pursuant to Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public should be excluded from the meeting for the business specified below in the agenda, on the grounds that if the public were present during this item, it is likely that there would be disclosure to them of exempt information as indicated against the item.
Point of order, Chair.
Councillor Parker.
I just point of order. Do we have to exclude the public, or do we have to take a vote on whether the public should be excluded?
We're taking a vote on excluding the public. So, the author of the report proposed that in Part 2 is satisfied that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. So, can we go to a vote to move into confidential session, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Arfi.
For.
Councillor Busby.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Holt.
For.
Councillor Malvisi.
For.
Councillor Osborne.
For.
Councillor Parker.
For.
And Councillor Ward.
For. Right.
Thank you, Chair. I will ask Rob to confirm when we are in private session.
Thank you.